To wrestling fans, he was the scariest monster to ever step in the ring. 400 pounds of pure power, dressed in black and red, smoke rising from his mask. In WCW, he was a world champion. In Japan, he made history. In the WWE, he was built as an unstoppable force. But behind the mask was Leon White, a kid from Compton who grew up fighting to survive. In the ring, that intensity made him special. Outside the ring, it caused chaos. He did not know how to slow down, and sometimes things got very real. These are the moments when Big Van Vader lost control for real, not for show, and changed lives forever. And by the time we reach number 1, you will understand why every single person who ever worked with Leon White said the same thing. That Vader was either the gentlest giant you ever met or the most terrifying human being on the planet. And you never knew which one you were going to get until it was too late. But before we get to the list, you need to understand where Vader came from, because that is the only way any of this makes sense. Leon Allen White was born on May 14, 1955, in Linwood, California, and grew up in Compton. Now, Compton in the 1960s was not exactly a place that bred soft individuals. This was South Central Los Angeles, gang territory. A neighborhood where violence was not an abstract concept, but a daily reality. Leon and his sister grew up in that environment, and the world made sure they understood what it meant from an early age. When Leon was just 12 years old, 2 men broke into his family home while he was watching Star Trek with his sister. The kids ran to their grandfather's house. And their grandfather, rather than calling the police or comforting the children, walked them back home, handed young Leon a shotgun, and told him he knew what to do if it ever happened again. That was the lesson. That was how you survived in that world. You did not wait for someone to save you. You handled it yourself. Leon's father was a United States Marine and an underwater welder for the Navy. A tough man from a tough world who invented an automobile hoist that eventually made the family enough money to move to a better area. But by then, the foundation had already been laid. Leon had been fighting nearly every single day at school. He had learned that the world was divided into people who could handle themselves and people who could not. And he was determined to be in the first category. Football saved him. Leon was a phenomenal athlete, an All-American offensive lineman in high school who was recruited by over 40 colleges before accepting a scholarship to the University of Colorado. He earned All-American honors there too, and picked up a degree in business administration along the way. After college, he was drafted in the 3rd round of the 1978 NFL draft by the Los Angeles Rams. He made the roster during their Super Bowl 14 run against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but knee problems kept him on the injured reserve list. A ruptured patella ended his football career before it ever truly got started. That is when professional wrestling found him. Trained by the legendary Brad Rheingans, the same man who would later train Brock Lesnar, Leon White entered the AWA under the names Baby Bull and Bull Power. He was green, he was raw, but he was 400 pounds of explosive athleticism, and anyone with eyes could see that this man was destined for something extraordinary. When he arrived in Japan and was given the name Big Van Vader, everything changed. The mask, the helmet, the entrance with the steam, the violence, all of it came together to create one of the most iconic characters in wrestling history. But here is the thing that people sometimes forget. Vader was not just a character. Vader was Leon White with the volume turned all the way up. Every bit of aggression, every bit of intensity, every bit of that survival instinct forged in the streets of Compton. It was all real. The character just gave him permission to let it out. And sometimes he let out too much. So with that understanding, let us begin with number 5, and a story about what happens when you put 2 of the stiffest wrestlers in history inside the same ring and tell them to have a match. Number 5, the Ken Shamrock War. In 1997, the World Wrestling Federation was in the middle of a seismic shift. The Attitude Era was dawning, and one of the most intriguing signings the company had made was Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man. Shamrock was a legitimate fighter, a pioneer of mixed martial arts, a man who had competed in the UFC and in pancrase fighting in Japan. He was the real deal in every sense of the word, and bringing him into professional wrestling was supposed to add an element of credibility and danger to the product. Vader was chosen as Shamrock's first real opponent. and on paper it made perfect sense. Two tough men. Two guys who could handle themselves. Two guys who would not crumble under physical pressure. The match was booked as No Holds Barred at In Your House, a cold day in hell in May 1997. What nobody anticipated was just how real things would get. Ken Shamrock came into the match doing what he had always done: fighting. He was a fighter by trade, and his instincts were to throw real strikes, real kicks, real knees. He was used to sparring, where you make contact but you control your power. The problem was that Shamrock's idea of controlled contact was still significantly harder than what most professional wrestlers were accustomed to receiving. And on this night, Shamrock's strikes were landing with devastating accuracy. During the match, Shamrock threw a knee that connected flush with Vader's face. He broke Vader's nose. Not just broke it. Broke it in 4 different places. The big man's face was a mess. Blood everywhere. And here is where things get interesting. Vader did not stop the match. He did not complain. He did not take a breather. Instead, he got angry. Vader leaned into Shamrock during the match and whispered for him to ease up, to lighten the strikes. But Shamrock, operating on pure fighting instinct, could not or would not dial it back. He kept throwing with that same intensity. And Vader, being Vader, decided that if this was how things were going to go, then he was going to give as good as he got. Maybe better. The receipt came in the form of a clubbing blow that dropped Shamrock to the mat like he had been hit by a freight train. Not a lariat. Vader just clubbed him in the head with everything he had. Shamrock crumpled. People watching backstage genuinely believed that the two men were trying to hurt each other, that the match had turned into a real fight. Officials were asking both men after the match if they were okay. Wrestlers were looking at each other with wide eyes, convinced they had just witnessed two men trying to take each other's heads off. In the end, Shamrock managed to lock in an ankle lock and Vader tapped out. The MMA fighter won the match. But what the result on paper does not tell you is that both men were genuinely hurt. Vader's nose was destroyed. Shamrock had been clubbed so hard he could barely stand. It was less a wrestling match and more a controlled demolition of two human beings. And the story did not end there. A few months later, the two met again in Japan at an FMW show in Kawasaki Stadium. A cage match with no ropes and UFC-style rules. And this one was even worse. Vader delivered a powerbomb with every ounce of force his 400 pounds could generate. What nobody knew was that Shamrock had a small tear in his lung. That powerbomb aggravated the injury catastrophically. Shamrock started coughing up blood. Not a little blood. He was drowning in it. The match had to be stopped. Shamrock later described the sensation as feeling like he was drowning from the inside. He said he was hacking out blood even before the bout started, but had brushed it off and competed anyway. Between the two matches, Vader and Shamrock had pushed each other to the absolute limits of human endurance. Both men had developed a mutual respect. But neither was willing to back down. Vader was who he was. And when pushed, he pushed back harder than almost anyone on the planet. But if the Shamrock incident showed Vader's unwillingness to back down in the ring, number 4 shows what happened when his rage was unleashed in a completely uncontrolled environment. A television studio in the Middle East, where Vader's temper would cause an international incident. Number 4. The Kuwait television explosion, April 1997. The World Wrestling Federation was on a tour of the Middle East. Vader and The Undertaker were invited to appear on a Kuwaiti television program called Good Morning Kuwait. It was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance. Shake some hands, smile for the cameras, talk about how excited they were to be performing in the region. Standard stuff. Now, here is where the story gets complicated, because there are multiple versions of what happened and why. According to Vader himself, the wrestlers were told before the appearance to ham it up, to be animated, to break things and cause a scene because it would generate huge ratings for the show. The WWE, according to Vader's account, wanted them to create a spectacle. But there was a critical communication failure. The host of the program apparently had no idea that any of this was planned. He did not know about wrestling antics. He did not know that these massive men were going to be performing in character. So the interview began normally enough. The host asked questions. The Undertaker sat there stoically, doing his thing, staying in character without causing any problems. And then the host asked the question. The question you never ever ask a professional wrestler if you want to walk away with your face intact. Is wrestling fake? Now, to most professional wrestlers, this question is annoying but manageable. You laugh it off. You dodge it. You make a joke. The Undertaker, for his part, did not react at all. He just sat there like a statue, which was perfectly in character for him. But Vader was not the Undertaker. Vader was a man who had sacrificed his body for this business. A man who had his eye popped out of its socket and pushed it back in with his bare hands so he could keep wrestling. A man who had broken bones, torn muscles, bled buckets of blood, all in service of this profession that this television host had just called fake. And something inside Leon White snapped. Vader flipped the table, just grabbed it and launched it. Then he grabbed the host, a television host, on live television, in a foreign country, and he got in the man's face and started screaming, physically intimidating him, putting his hands on him, making it abundantly clear that if this man thought wrestling was fake, Vader was more than happy to demonstrate just how real it could get. The Undertaker, to his eternal credit, remained completely calm throughout the entire ordeal. Just sat there. Did not move. Did not react. A perfect counterpoint to the chaos that was unfolding beside him. The aftermath was immediate and severe. Vader was detained by Kuwaiti authorities. He spent a week under house arrest in the country. Assault charges were filed. The host's lawyer got involved. It became a genuine international incident involving a professional wrestler assaulting a television personality in a foreign nation. Eventually, the situation was resolved. Vader paid a fine, reported at about $164, which seems absurdly low given the severity of what happened. He was allowed to leave the country, but the damage was done, and not just to the television host. Vince McMahon's faith in Vader, which had already been shaky, was severely damaged. The boss could not trust this man, could not predict what he would do, could not control the monster that he had signed to a contract. And in the World Wrestling Federation, where Vince McMahon's control was absolute, being unpredictable in the wrong way was a death sentence for your career. Jim Cornette later noted that the Kuwait incident was assault, plain and simple. There was no defending it. Vader had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. And while he remained with the company for a while longer, the trajectory of his WWE career was irrevocably altered. The plans for Vader to become WWE champion, plans that had been in motion since his debut at the 1996 Royal Rumble, were dead. And Kuwait was one of the nails in that coffin. That brings us to number 3. And if you thought the Kuwait incident was bad, wait until you hear about what happened in a WCW locker room when Vader picked a fight with the wrong man. A man who was smaller, older, had a bad arm, and was wearing flip-flops, and who still beat the living hell out of the mastodon. Number 3. The Paul Orndorff locker room. Brawl. Paul Orndorff was one of the most underrated tough guys in wrestling history. Mr. Wonderful had been a legitimate star during the WWE's golden era, main eventing the first WrestleMania alongside Hulk Hogan. But by the mid-1990s, his in-ring career was winding down and he had transitioned into a role as a WCW producer. His job was to help put shows together, coordinate talent, make sure everyone was where they needed to be and doing what they needed to do. On this particular day, Orndorff needed Vader to go tape some promotional interviews, standard stuff, part of the job. Orndorff found Vader and told him he had promos to do. Vader was not moving fast enough. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was in a bad mood. Maybe he just did not feel like being told what to do by a former wrestler who was now working behind the scenes. Whatever the reason, Vader essentially told Orndorff to get lost, to leave him alone. The accounts vary on exactly what was said, but the message was clear. Vader was not interested in being ordered around. Orndorff did not take kindly to this. He told Vader to get his fat rear end moving, or words to that effect. And Vader in return made a comment that questioned Orndorff's toughness. Something along the lines of calling him a name that a man like Paul Orndorff was not going to tolerate. Now, here is what makes this story so incredible. At the time of this confrontation, Paul Orndorff had a bad arm. Years of wrestling had taken a severe toll on his body, and one of his arms had significant atrophy. He was also wearing flip-flops, not boots, not sneakers, flip-flops. The man was in no physical condition to be fighting anyone, let alone a 400-pound monster who was in his physical prime. None of that mattered. Orndorff punched Vader, just cracked him right in the face, and then the brawl was on. The two men went at it in the locker room, and by all accounts, Orndorff was getting the better of the exchange. Jim Cornette, who is one of the great storytellers in wrestling history, described the scene with vivid detail. Orndorff punching Vader and then kicking him with the flip-flops, and the sound of those flip-flops connecting with Vader's body sounding like two dead fish being slapped together. It was humiliating. A 400-pound monster, one of the most feared men in the history of the business, getting beaten up by a retired wrestler with a bad arm and beach footwear. The locker room was stunned. People could not believe what they were seeing. And when it was over, the damage was not just physical. Someone had to take the fall for the incident. And in WCW's mind, that someone was Vader. He was done, released from his contract. A massive deal that he had just signed with the company, torn up and thrown away because he had picked a fight he could not win with a man he should never have disrespected. Mick Foley, who knew Vader as well as anyone, later said that Leon was never quite the same after the Orndorff fight. He had lost some of his aura. The locker room had seen the mastodon get beaten by a man half his size, and that changes the way people look at you. It changes the way they respect you. It changes everything. Vader's ex-wife Deborah put it even more bluntly. She said that the Orndorff incident was the beginning of the end, the beginning of Leon making bad decisions and bad mistakes, the first domino in a chain that would eventually lead to his career never reaching the heights that everyone believed it should have. From WCW, Vader went to the WWE, brought in by Jim Ross, who believed in his talent. But the scars of that locker room brawl, both physical and psychological, traveled with him. And the reputation of being a man who could not control his temper, who could snap at any moment, who might pick a fight in the wrong place at the wrong time, followed him like a shadow for the rest of his career. Now, if those first three entries showed you the consequences of Vader's rage, number 2 is going to show you the sheer, raw, almost inhuman intensity that made him a legend. A moment that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with a man who simply refused to accept that his body had limits. A moment that is still considered one of the most gruesome and incredible displays of toughness in the history of professional sports. Number 2. The Stan Hansen Eye Incident. February 10, 1990. The Tokyo Dome, a supercard event bringing together the two biggest wrestling promotions in Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling and All Japan Pro Wrestling, for a show called Super Fight. The card was stacked with dream matches. And near the top of that card was a match between Big Van Vader, representing NJPW, and Stan Hansen, representing AJPW. Now, you need to understand what this match meant. In 1990, interpromotional matches in Japan were incredibly rare. The two companies guarded their top stars jealously. Antonio Inoki, who ran NJPW, and Giant Baba, who ran AJPW, were bitter rivals. Neither wanted their top foreign star to lose decisively to the other side's champion. So the match was booked to end in a double countout, a non-finish. But to make that non-finish satisfying to a crowd of over 50,000 people in the Tokyo Dome, the match needed to be as physically intense as humanly possible. The violence had to compensate for the lack of a definitive ending. And Big Van Vader and Stan Hansen were the two perfect men for that assignment, because neither of them knew how to have a match that was not real. Stan Hansen was legendary for his stiffness. The man was legally blind and threw lariats with reckless abandon. He was a cowboy from Texas who hit like a truck and did not apologize for it. Vader was Vader. 400 pounds of Compton-bred fury who hit just as hard and absorbed punishment like it did not exist. From the moment the bell rang, these two men were hammering each other. This was not a performance. This was a fight. Two bulls crashing into each other with everything they had. The crowd could feel it. Everyone watching could tell that something different was happening in that ring. Before the match even officially started, Hansen accidentally broke Vader's nose with the bull rope he carried to the ring. Just cracked it. And Vader did not even flinch. That was just the appetizer. During the match, in the middle of a furious exchange of strikes, Hansen's thumb caught Vader in the eye. It was not intentional. Hansen was legally blind and throwing wild, and in the chaos of two men beating the hell out of each other, his thumb went right into Vader's eye socket, and it dislodged the eyeball. Let that sink in. His eyeball came out of the socket. Vader stumbled. He reached up and felt something that should not have been where it was. His eye was hanging there, partially out of its socket, and for a moment, the entire Tokyo Dome seemed to hold its breath. Because everyone who could see what had happened, everyone close enough to the ring, knew that this was real. This was not a wrestling angle. This was a man who had just lost his eye. And this is where the legend of Big Van Vader crosses the line from impressive to genuinely unbelievable. Vader reached up, pressed his thumb against the displaced eyeball, and pushed it back into the socket. Just shoved it back in, with his bare hand, standing in the middle of a wrestling ring in front of 50,000 people. And then he held his eyelid closed over it. And then he kept wrestling. He kept wrestling for approximately 15 more minutes, throwing suplexes, taking lariats, absorbing punishment and dishing it out, with a broken nose and an eye that he had just manually reinserted into his own skull. When asked about it later, Vader's explanation was simple. He thought he had lost the eye entirely. He genuinely believed in that moment that his eye was gone forever, but he was not going to stop the match. Stan Hansen would not have stopped if the situation were reversed, and Vader was not going to be the one who quit. After the match, Vader was rushed to a Japanese hospital. Surgeons inserted a metal plate beneath his right eye to support the orbital structure during healing. His vision in that eye was permanently altered. He dealt with increased sensitivity to light for the rest of his life. The injury was real, it was devastating, and it was the kind of thing that would have ended most men's careers on the spot. But Vader came back. He always came back, because quitting was not in his programming. Pain was not a signal to stop. Pain was just information. And Vader had learned a long time ago in the streets of Compton that information was only useful if you acted on it. And his action was always the same. Keep going. Hit harder. Never stop. Stan Hansen later wrote about the incident in his memoirs. He acknowledged causing the injury but framed it as an accident, born from the intense style of wrestling that both men practiced. He said that Vader was a big, tough man and that they beat the hell out of each other on a regular basis. But that night was just a little more extreme than usual. Hansen also noted that the incident increased his professional respect for Vader. In the world of 1990s Japanese wrestling, where toughness was the most valued currency, Vader had just proven that he was the richest man in the room. The eye incident became the defining moment of Vader's career. It was the story that got told first whenever anyone mentioned his name. It was the proof that this man was not like other wrestlers, not like other athletes, not like other human beings. He had pushed his own eye back into his head and finished a match. Nothing else needed to be said. And now we arrive at number 1. The moment that changed everything. The moment that started Vader's legend in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. A moment so explosive that it caused thousands of people to riot, got a wrestling promotion banned from its home arena, and required police intervention to restore order. A moment that happened on a cold December night in Japan and echoed through the wrestling world for decades. Number 1. The night Vader made Japan riot. December 27, 1987. Ryogoku Sumo Hall, Tokyo, Japan. New Japan Pro Wrestling's year-end show. The arena was sold out. 10,000 fans packed into the building, expecting another night of their beloved hero, Antonio Inoki, standing tall against whatever challenger dared to face him. You need to understand what Antonio Inoki meant to the Japanese people. He was not just a wrestler. He was a national icon, a cultural hero on the level of Hulk Hogan in America, but even more revered. Inoki had founded NJPW. He had fought Muhammad Ali. He had represented Japanese pride and strength on the world stage for decades. His fans did not just cheer for him, they worshipped him. And Inoki had not lost a match in 2 years. He was seen as essentially invincible. On this night, Inoki had already wrestled Riki Choshu earlier on the card. He had defeated Choshu by disqualification in a hard-fought match. The crowd was satisfied. Their hero had triumphed once again. All was right in the world. And then the lights changed. Out came a monster, a masked, hulking figure unlike anything the Japanese audience had ever seen. Big Van Vader, making his NJPW debut. Leon White had originally been signed to All Japan Pro Wrestling, but Giant Baba had traded his contract over to NJPW. Inoki himself had orchestrated the move because he wanted a new, larger-than-life villain to reinvigorate his promotion. Someone who could play the role of the unstoppable foreign monster. Someone who could make Inoki's eventual triumph over the Beast mean something. But Inoki had underestimated what he was unleashing. The already exhausted Inoki accepted Vader's challenge. Because that is what heroes do. They fight. They do not back down. They face the monster head-on and they prevail. That is how the story is supposed to go. Except this time, the story went very differently. Vader came out of the gate like a force of nature. He did not wrestle Inoki, he brutalized him. In under 3 minutes, the masked monster had decimated the most beloved figure in Japanese wrestling history. Inoki did not get any meaningful offense. He did not mount a comeback. He did not fight valiantly against overwhelming odds. He was simply destroyed, annihilated, made to look like a helpless old man against an unstoppable force, and the crowd could not process what they had just seen. But Vader was not finished. After the bell rang, after the match was officially over, Vader kept going. He continued the assault on Inoki. Young boys and trainees rushed the ring to protect their idol, and Vader threw them aside like they weighed nothing. Referees came in, and Vader tossed them out of the ring. Security tried to intervene, and Vader hurled them away with contempt. He was standing in the middle of that ring, surrounded by bodies, bellowing like a primordial beast, completely consumed by the moment. And that is when the dam broke. 10,000 Japanese fans erupted. Not in cheers, not in boos, in absolute, uncontrollable rage. They started throwing their seat cushions into the ring. Then they started throwing chairs. Then drinks. Then anything they could get their hands on. Fires were started. Actual fires. Fans were setting their seat cushions ablaze and hurling them like flaming frisbees toward the ring. The arena descended into complete and total chaos. Masa Saito, a Japanese wrestling legend who was backstage, burst into Vader's locker room and told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to get out of the building immediately. The fans were coming. They were going to break through whatever barriers stood between them and the man who had just humiliated their hero. And they were not coming to ask for autographs. It took the police over an hour to regain control of the situation. 1 full hour. In a country where public order and respect are cultural cornerstones, 10,000 people had been driven to violent riot by the actions of one man inside a wrestling ring. A few days later, the Tokyo Sumo Association made their decision. New Japan Pro Wrestling was banned from Sumo Hall, their home arena, the building where they had run shows for years. Banned. The ban remained in effect for 2 years, until 1989. All because of what Big Van Vader had done on that December night. Now, here is the thing that separates this incident from a typical wrestling angle gone wrong. Vader did not accidentally cause a riot. The match itself was booked. The result was planned. Inoki was supposed to lose. The idea was to create a new monster villain for the promotion. But the execution, the way Vader went about it, the sheer, unbridled ferocity with which he destroyed Inoki and then continued the assault after the match, that went beyond what anyone had anticipated. Vader had been given permission to be a monster, and he had taken that permission and run with it to a place that nobody could have predicted. The riot was real. The ban was real. The fear in the locker room as fans tried to breach the backstage area was real. And all of it came from the same place. That place inside Leon White where the switch did not exist. Where the line between performance and reality was so thin as to be invisible. Where the monster was not a character but a part of who he actually was. Inoki, to his credit, recognized what he had in Vader. Rather than being angry about the riot or the ban, he saw the money in it. He saw that Vader had created something genuinely special. A villain that the audience believed in with every fiber of their being. A monster that they truly wanted to see defeated. And over the next several years, Inoki and Vader would have numerous rematches to sell out crowds across Japan. Just not in Sumo Hall. Not for a while. The Tokyo Dome became the new venue for their confrontations. In April 1989, Vader won an 8-man tournament at Battle Satellite in the Tokyo Dome, defeating Shinya Hashimoto in the final to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. He was the first foreigner in history to hold the title. He had gone from causing a riot to becoming the most important foreign performer in Japan. From pariah to champion, all because of that intensity, that switch that did not exist. And there you have it. 5 incredible and terrifying moments when Big Van Vader snapped and showed the world what happened when 400 pounds of Compton fury was unleashed without restraint. From beating the hell out of Ken Shamrock in a match that nearly killed the world's most dangerous man, to flipping a table and assaulting a television host in Kuwait because he dared to call wrestling fake. From getting beaten up by Paul Orndorff in flip-flops in a locker room brawl that cost him his WCW career, to pushing his own eyeball back into its socket against Stan Hansen and finishing a match like nothing had happened. And finally, to that unforgettable night in Sumo Hall when he destroyed Antonio Inoki so viciously that 10,000 fans rioted and got NJPW banned from its own home arena. What becomes clear when you look at all of these incidents together is that Vader was never just playing a character. The character was him. The rage was real. The intensity was real. The inability to hold back, to dial it down, to recognize when enough was enough, that was all real. It was woven into the fabric of who Leon White was, forged in the streets of Compton and refined through decades of the most physically punishing profession on earth. Mick Foley, who worked with Vader more than almost anyone and who literally lost his ear in a match with the Man in Germany in 1994, called Vader the stiffest wrestler he had ever been in the ring with. He said that Vader pummeled him on many occasions, broke his nose twice, dislocated his jaw, and gave him stitches above and below the eye, all in one match. And yet Foley also talked about Vader's sensitive side, how the big man would cry in the locker room after accidentally hurting someone, how he was genuinely distraught after the ear incident and insisted on riding with Foley to the hospital, how beneath all that rage and intensity, there was a man who cared deeply about the people around him, but simply could not control the force that lived inside him. Jim Ross brought Vader into the WWE because he believed the man was a once-in-a-generation talent, a human demolition machine who could have been one of the greatest WWE champions of all time. Jim Cornette said that everyone in the WWE was amazed when Vader arrived. They could not believe they had him. They knew he was going to be a future world champion. And yet that future never materialized. Not because of a lack of talent, not because of a lack of ability, but because of the same thing that made Vader great in the first place, that uncontrollable intensity, that refusal to compromise, that switch that simply did not exist. Shawn Michaels refused to drop the title to him after their SummerSlam match in 1996, reportedly telling Vince McMahon that Vader was not ready. Jim Cornette has called Michaels unprofessional for it, and that decision crushed Leon. His son Jesse White later said that his father was sensitive, and never getting that main event run in the WWE affected him deeply. The Kuwait incident sealed it. The backstage reputation sealed it. And the man who should have been one of the greatest WWE champions in history spent his final years in the company losing to Kane in a mask versus mask match and drifting further and further down the card. Vader left the WWE in 1998. He continued wrestling around the world for years after that. Japan, the independent circuit, brief returns to various promotions. He never stopped. Because stopping was not something Leon White was capable of. The man who pushed his eye back into his head and kept fighting was never going to voluntarily walk away from the ring. Leon Allen White passed away on June 18, 2018, at the age of 63, due to heart complications following a severe case of pneumonia. His son Jesse announced the news on social media, and the wrestling world mourned the loss of one of its most unique and compelling figures. In 2022, Vader was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, a belated acknowledgement of a career that spanned 3 decades and multiple continents. The legacy of Big Van Vader is complicated. He was a monster and a teddy bear. a destroyer, and a man who cried when he accidentally hurt people. A performer of extraordinary ability who could never quite control the very thing that made him extraordinary. He was both the greatest super heavyweight in wrestling history and a cautionary tale about what happens when talent and intensity exist without the ability to manage them. But perhaps the best way to understand Vader is through something his ex-wife Deborah said in The Dark Side of the Ring, documentary about his life. She said that when you play that hard, it catches up to you. Pain will change you. Leon White played harder than almost anyone who has ever lived. He played hard in the streets of Compton. He played hard on the football field at Colorado. He played hard in the rings of Japan, WCW, and the WWE. He played hard in every bar, every locker room, every television studio, and every arena he ever set foot in. And the pain caught up to him. It changed him. It shaped him into something that was both magnificent and tragic. A man who could do things in a wrestling ring that defied belief, but who could never quite find the off switch that would have allowed him to enjoy the fruits of those abilities. They do not make them like Big Van Vader anymore. The modern wrestling business has safety protocols and HR departments and medical officials at ringside with the authority to stop matches. There is no room for a man who pushes his own eye back in and keeps fighting. No tolerance for a performer who flips tables on television hosts in foreign countries. No place for a monster who is too real, too intense, too much. And maybe that is for the best. Maybe the business is safer now. Maybe the performers live longer and healthier lives. But it is also a less dangerous place. A place with fewer legends who make you genuinely believe that what you are watching might go wrong at any moment. Fewer men who blur the line between performance and reality so completely that you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. Fewer moments that make 10,000 people riot because they have forgotten, even for a second, that what they are watching is supposed to be entertainment. Big Van Vader was real. The rage was real. The pain was real. The consequences were real. And the legend, all 400 pounds of it, will endure long after the steam has cleared and the mask has been put away for good. Like and subscribe for more hard-hitting wrestling documentaries. Until next time.